a mysterious entity sends a white orb down to Earth. This orb possesses the ability to transform into anything it encounters. Upon landing, it comes into contact with a rock and assumes its form, remaining in that state for countless years. One day, a wounded dog collapses onto the rock and succumbs to its injuries. In response, the orb adopts the dog's shape and begins to wander. As it ventures onward, the newly transformed dog eventually stumbles upon a settlement. The place is eerily silent, completely deserted, save for one overly cheerful boy who still resides there. Overjoyed at the sight of the dog, the boy eagerly calls out to him, referring to him as Joanne. He expresses his happiness at Joanne's return and then carries on with his daily tasks. Whenever he has a free moment, he allows himself to dream of the paradise beyond the mountain. The other villagers had already departed for this supposed haven, leaving him behind to care for the sick and elderly, who due to their frailty could never make the journey. Determined to follow in their footsteps, the boy gathers his belongings and sets out toward paradise. At first, everything seems to be going smoothly, but his journey takes a dire turn when he injures his leg. The wound refuses to stop bleeding, and in his weakened state, he struggles to keep moving. Each time he comes across a marker left behind by the villagers, he clings to a flicker of hope. However, that hope is utterly shattered when he stumbles upon broken carts and tombstones littering the path. Disheartened and defeated, he makes the painful decision to return. But without proper care, his injury continues to worsen with each passing day. Eventually, the boy succumbs to his wounds and takes his final breath. The dog then takes on the form of the boy and resolves to live the life the boy had once dreamed of. Now appearing as the human from before, the orb sets off toward the so-called paradise the boy had spoken of. However, having no knowledge of how to survive as a human, he perishes repeatedly. Sometimes, his life ends at the claws of massive bears, an unfortunate fate that any ordinary person would have likely avoided. Other times, starvation or injuries prove to be his undoing. But being an alien entity, he continuously regenerates, returning to life over and over again. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, a girl named March is about to be sacrificed to a deity known as Anigoma. Seems like this March won't even get to see April. However, she has a few loyal friends, one of whom helps her escape as she is being carried up the mountain to her fate. This friend, Perona, does her best to secure March's freedom, but the villagers refuse to give up the chase. Their pursuit only ends when they are struck with fear upon witnessing the orb mid-regeneration. After some time, March starts offering fruit to the boy. He devours it in the manner of a wild animal, which for some reason, she finds endearing. Children really do have an odd sense of what's cute. Later, as the two rest in a quiet spot, March is plagued by nightmares of her younger sister and friend being sacrificed in her place. Jolted awake by fear, she makes the decision to return to the main road, allowing herself to be recaptured. However, the boy instinctively follows, drawn to the comfort of her presence. March then jokingly declares herself his mother. Meanwhile, Perona is seized for aiding in March's escape. As she remains restrained, the villagers guarding her come under attack by a massive bear. Seizing the opportunity, she uses a hidden knife to cut through her bindings and break free, but unfortunately for her, the bear isn't exactly a picky eater and quickly shifts its attention toward her. In a desperate attempt to escape, Perona tumbles off a cliff. Elsewhere, March attempts to teach the boy to say thank you, but her efforts prove fruitless. Meanwhile, Hayes, accompanied by a search party, locates March and the boy as they idly wander through the mountains. March is force-fed a drug-laced jelly before being carried away to the sacrificial altar. Soon, she finds herself tied in place, awaiting the return of the giant bear, who, given his luck, has probably been starving all day. Hayes and the other villagers, assuming the bear to be Anigoma, retreat, leaving it to feast on March and complete the ritual. However, Perona arrives just in time to intervene. She attempts to fight off the beast, but is ultimately knocked unconscious by its attack. At last, the orb steps in to rescue March, taking on the form of a wolf. The wolf lunges forward, sinking its teeth into the bear's neck. The beast thrashes for a moment before succumbing to its wounds, bleeding out on the spot. With the bear defeated, Hayes steps in and declares that if everyone follows her to the nation of Yanom, their lives will be spared. With little choice, they agree. At that moment, the wolf finally manages to speak, uttering its first words, "Thank you for the food." Now officially named Fushur, the wolf travels alongside March and Perona as they embark on the long, arduous journey to Yanom under Hayes' guidance. Initially, the trip seems almost too good to be true. Hayes appears kind, allowing them to enjoy themselves along the way. They get to taste new foods, take in the scenery, and embrace a sense of peace that feels almost unnatural, especially considering they had all been trying to kill each other not too long ago. But the moment of bliss is short-lived. Without their knowledge, Hayes drugs them, and one by one, they all collapse into a deep slumber. When Fushur awakens, he finds himself imprisoned. His suffering doesn't end there. He is subjected to relentless torture at the hands of prisoners, who are eager to test whether he is truly immortal. After enduring severe pain, Fushur unknowingly expands his vocabulary, managing to say, "It hurts." Desperate to escape, he shifts back into a wolf and bolts from the cell, but his freedom is short-lived. A poisoned arrow strikes him, causing his body to weaken as he limps toward the cell where March is being held. Upon reaching her, March quickly tends to his wounds. Meanwhile, Perona devises an escape plan. She tells March that if they return to the village with Anigoma's lifeless body, they could convince the villagers that future sacrifices are unnecessary. With this goal in mind, Fushur and March begin digging a tunnel to the outside, but before they can complete their escape, they are caught in the act. Hayes, ever manipulative, forces March to care for the fallen bear, hoping it will miraculously recover. But despite her efforts, its injuries are far too severe for it to be saved. At the same time, Perona is discovered by a guard and accidentally falls into a storage room. With her cover blown, she has no choice but to abandon the original plan and make a break for it immediately. With the villagers of Yanom hot on their heels, Perona, Fushur, and March scramble to escape the prison, their fates hanging by a thread as they flee for their lives. During the chase, an arrow is fired at Perona, but before it can reach her, March throws herself in the way and takes the hit instead. With her death, the story finally moves forward, though at quite the heartbreaking cost. Fushur, consumed by rage, transforms into the massive bear from before and annihilates their enemies in a fit of vengeance. With the immediate threat eliminated, they successfully make their escape. However, Perona is now faced with the painful task of delivering the tragic news of March's death to her parents. Looks like death quite literally came marching for her. Despite everything, the Yanome soldiers remain relentless in their pursuit of Fushur. Realizing the danger he poses to those around him, Perona urges him to leave the village behind and carve out a new life for himself, away from all this chaos. Though hesitant, Fushur ultimately agrees. As he makes his escape, a villager attempts to strike him down with an arrow, but Perona quickly intervenes, shooting the attacker's hand before they can fire. With that, Fushur vanishes into the forest, disappearing into the unknown. Before long, he unconsciously shifts into March's form, continuing his journey in her likeness. During his travels, Fushur once again crosses paths with Elder Pioran, the same woman he had been with during their prison break. Looks like prison buddies really do stick together. The Elder welcomes him warmly and, noticing his interest in learning, begins teaching him how to speak and write. Over time, Fushur gradually picks up the ability to communicate, managing to string full sentences together, albeit at a slower pace than most. He might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but compared to some humans, he's practically a genius. Now capable of speaking, Fushur shares his story with the Elder. He recounts everything from his arrival on Earth to meeting the boy, and finally his time with March. Fushur and Pioran eventually arrive in Konoha, a nation currently embroiled in conflict with Yanome. Their purpose here is to track down Pyron's long-lost lover. However, their journey takes an unexpected turn when, during a peaceful night of camping, they are suddenly ambushed by a strange entity. This creature strips Fushur of all his memories, reducing him back to his original orb form. At this critical moment, Fushur's creator, the Beholder, materializes before him. With the Beholder's guidance, Fushur manages to overcome the creature and reclaim his lost memories. The Beholder then reveals that Fushur's existence is meant to safeguard humanity, but warns him that there are beings who will try to prevent him from fulfilling this mission. By the episode's conclusion, they finally reach the home of Pyron's lover, where they encounter a young boy named Gugu. Gugu is an energetic child, but like most cheerful kids in this world, his past is steeped in tragedy. Once, he lived happily with his older brother, but that peace was shattered when his brother abandoned him. Left to fend for himself, Gugu then found himself caught in a devastating railroad accident that completely disfigured his face. He was rescued by Pyron's lover, a man known as Boozman, who took him in. However, due to the severe damage to his face, Gugu was forced to wear a mask to conceal his appearance. Determined to survive on his own, Gugu drifted from shop to shop in search of work. It is around this time that Pioran and Fushur finally arrive at Boozman's establishment, where they are introduced to Gugu. Over time, Fushur and Gugu interact frequently, gradually developing a solid friendship. Meanwhile, a girl named Reen Krop, who works at the restaurant, starts to take a liking to Fushur and his peculiar behavior. This newfound attention toward Fushur stirs jealousy within Gugu, prompting him to push himself harder in an attempt to impress his crush. Go for it, Gugu. We're all cheering you on. After a heated argument with Boozman, Gugu storms out of the restaurant and heads into the city in search of work. Unfortunately, due to his disfigured face, he faces constant discrimination and mistreatment wherever he goes. Frustrated and disheartened, he quits every job after being bullied, unable to find a place where he is accepted. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Fushur tries his hand at cooking and cleaning, but to say he's terrible at it would be an understatement. After a series of absolute failures, Pioran advises Fushur that he needs Gugu's guidance to master these skills. She insists that once he learns how to cook, he'll finally become a proper adult, because nothing says maturity like not burning water. Desperate for quick cash, Gugu considers selling the ring Reen had given him, but in the end, he sacrifices it to help his missing brother instead. That night, things take an even darker turn when a group of shady men attempt to kidnap Gugu, wanting to exploit his unusual appearance for entertainment. Before they can succeed, however, Fushur arrives and scares them off, sending them running for their lives. With the danger gone, Fushur and Gugu reconcile, and Fushur formally asks for Gugu's help in learning household chores and cooking. With that, the two solidify their friendship, and Gugu finally has someone who truly values him. As their bond strengthens, Fushur eventually manages to prepare a decent meal and shares it with Gugu, an undeniable milestone in his journey toward human-like existence. As they eat, they delve into deep conversations about life and death. Fushur reveals that he has the ability to take on the form of anyone who dies in front of him, just as he did with March and the nameless boy from the north. He then tells Gugu that if he were to die, he would take on his form as well. Their moment is interrupted when Reen finds them, but just as they begin chatting, Gugu realizes that he has lost his mask. Seeing his distress, Fushur immediately sets out to retrieve it. Meanwhile, Reen and Gugu get into an argument over his refusal to show his face. Despite the tension, they eventually reconcile and decide to return to the restaurant together. However, Reen's father, apparently allergic to things going smoothly, throws a wrench into the plot by sending kidnappers after her. Fortunately, Reen proves that she's more than just a damsel in distress, managing to escape before they can capture her.